Elizabeth pointed out to me, it's a really short piece of scripture this morning. And it is, indeed. If you'd like to follow along, you can either look at the screen or the front of your bulletin. I'm reading from the prophet Micah, 7th chapter, 7th verse. But as for me, I will look to the Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me. This is Advent. The church is beautifully decorated, and we hear great words of music, and some of us are dressed in our finery. I only get to wear my Christmas Advent stole 5 times during the year. It's beautiful, and all that being exciting, but part of the reality is this time of the year is actually pretty tough for most people. My phone and emails and conversations have been everything except uplifting. From people who have loved ones dying, to those who are remembering loved ones who have died, to a young man who I haven't spoken with for 20-some years who contacted me at the verge of suicide, having been injured in Afghanistan and not knowing where life was leading him, to a woman yesterday at the ball game sitting next to me who took my card and emailed me later in the evening and saying, I have this a strange relationship with my father who I'm at the ball game with, and life had been really difficult for me. And even though I was talking about Butler basketball, I wasn't talking about anything spiritual. She said, just knowing that you're a man of God sitting next to me gave me some light. I know people who I've had conversations with and who remarked to me that during this time of year, that when it's gray outside in the winter, holidays come, they suffer from something called SAD, seasonal affective depressive disorder, and I know hundreds and thousands of people struggle with that. I have people who contact me and have a 3-year-old child who has been going back and forth to Cincinnati Children's Hospital because of a liver transplant, and contacted their county's agencies for help in Tipton County, and the county said, well, you're too late to get help. You should have had to register before this. So her and her 3 children are now trying to figure out if they can celebrate the holiday. Or a woman who contacted me and has twins who are at Riley Children's Hospital right now. And as I was sharing with them about Christmas needs, that they said, don't want any toys. We really need some clothing for our infant children and my 10-year-old niece who lives with me, and food. A lot of things that as you look out across that would leave you hopeless. But Micah writes, but as for me, I will look to the Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me. How many of you had an opportunity last Wednesday evening to watch a Charlie Brown Christmas? Anybody? One of my favorite cartoons of all time. In this story, our old friend Charlie Brown is struggling to find out why he is so depressed at Christmas time. Now maybe he suffers from seasonal affective depressive disorder. We know a lot of folks do, but we don't know the reason. But whatever the reason, old Charlie Brown seeks out help and advice from a psychiatrist, Lucy. And of course she convinces him to audition to direct the school play, the Christmas play. And so, as is the custom of Charlie Brown, that doesn't go so well, right? He is rejected as a director. Instead, he's asked to go pick up the Christmas tree for the play. So old Charlie goes out to pick up the Christmas tree, and here are all these bright, shiny, glistening, metallic trees with all kinds of decorations. And what does Charlie pick and bring back? A little forlorn tree that isn't much more than a branch. Charlie takes this tree back to the cast, and they laugh at him and they laugh at the tree. this ridicule finally pushes Charlie to the edge, and he screams, "Would someone please tell me what the true meaning of Christmas is?" Now, not only in a Charlie Brown Christmas, but actually in a lot of Charlie Brown stories, you'll find a lot of real morality has been addressed. The writer has not frightened at all to touch some of the edgier subjects that we human beings deal with, like depression, the often cruel nature of children and adults toward one another, the lack of human belief, and our lack of affection toward one another. But this author spells those things out through the innocent eyes of children. But amidst all the woes that Charlie Brown has in this and in many other episodes of Charlie Brown, Charlie steadfastly never gives up hope. Hope. Let me give you another story of hope. This one's from True Life. Last week, as I was fishing for ideas on my sermon, as I often do, I wrote on Facebook, "Anybody got any hope stories to tell me?" And a friend of mine from Florida, who's a professional musician, Rachel Camps, wrote me, and then she emailed me the entire story. Now, I'm aware of the fact I'm going to be having to look down most of this time, but bear with me here. Rachel said that she shared this story of hope. It happened last Sunday morning at church. Later in the afternoon on Sunday, while she was out running errands, she was listening to NPR, and the talk show was featuring an author who was the author of Imperfect Perfect. In listening to the radio broadcast, it occurred to her that what she had witnessed earlier that day was a demonstration of hope's struggle. Remember that. Hope's struggle. Important stuff. As the radio personality defined hope as a work of struggle, and it made her recall what had happened to her that Sunday morning. You see, she had sung at a wedding several years ago, and she had taken on the vows as a couple to support that marriage and take it seriously. But on that morning, the couple was on the verge of divorce. After hugging each one of them separately, because they were living separately and had driven to church in separate cars, she had the privilege of greeting both of them, and after greeting both of them, she walked with the estranged wife toward her husband, who she says still loves her, but despite his words of her actions are a deal breaker. She learned that they were staying off their divorce for right now in order to be more open and to see if God can restore their marriage. Rachel said, "That's the deal. That's the hope. That's the precious, holy moment I shared with them. I encourage them to see this time as an opportunity for God to do amazing things. I encourage them to walk carefully and to give God a chance to do what God does best. God specializes in renewal, restoration, reconstruction of broken lives and dreams. The touching thing," she said, was, "I felt their hunger. I felt their hurt. I felt their love for each other. And I felt their vulnerability as they wanted their marriage to work." She said, "I hope to see hope in action, and I love the gospel's message of hope. I love to witness the souls giving God a chance to remake and renew instead of just quitting, not forgiving, not cross-examining their lives to see how such a troubled spot could cause such a large gap, such a mortal wound to the marriage of once two lovers." She said, "I believe in hope. I believe in God's specialty, renewing and remaking broken lives into a whole new creation." Hope. I was thinking about Micah's scripture, and I thought, well, some folks might not know very much about Micah, so maybe I need to spend a small amount of time doing a little teaching about that as we go on. At the time that Micah was writing, there were two kingdoms in Israel, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, right? The northern kingdom was Israel or Samaria, and the south was Judah or Jerusalem. In about 722 BC, the Assyrians attacked northern Israel and captured it and took the people of northern Israel into captivity. And then in 597, the Babylonians did the same thing to the southern kingdom. Now Micah lived about 740 BC, so he was doing his prophesying just a little bit after the northern people had been taken into captivity, but before the Babylonians had taken the southern captivity. It was a time that Hezekiah was a king. And he talks to these people and tells them that the same thing is going to happen to you folks in the south that happened in the north. You are going to be conquered because of your sinful life and the way you live. So up to this point, if you read Micah, up to 7.7, there is nothing but bad news. I mean, Micah is not sharing anything hopeful, good news there. Everything he's saying is bad about how bad they are and about what bad is going to befall them. Nothing good. But then at 7.7, Micah speaks his own thoughts. His thoughts of hope. And he says, I will trust in God. That is where my hope lies. Micah continues to wait for God. Micah waits for God's salvation, knows that God will hear him. In other words, Micah does not give up hope. He's not miserable. He's not grouchy or cranky. He knows that God will act in his favor, that he will save him and save the people of God if they just patiently wait and hope and pray. Hope. You know, it strikes me that us modern folk living right now communicate with others more frequently than we ever have in the entire history of the world. That might sound amazing, but it's really the truth. We communicate more than any time in the history of the world. Back when I was growing up, you had a black box on the wall that Ma Bell owned, and you might talk to somebody there, but of course when you pick up the phone, somebody else might pick it up because you're on a party line, so it might be Nellie down the street, getting into your conversation. Or you might pick up a pen and pencil and write a note and mail it. Or you might have a cassette tape and record a message and mail it. Anybody remember what a cassette tape is?
Yes.
And you might even make a face-to-face visit and talk to somebody. But all those things were really limited. That limitation does not exist today. We are able to be in human contact with people 24/7, and we do. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. And sometimes we think it is, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. Think about if you're out on public transportation, in a shopping mall, or a grocery store, just walking down the street. I bet you at least 50% of the people you go by are either doing this or doing this. Right? They're either texting or calling someone and talking and communicating. Not a bad thing. For instance, we have gone so far now that the program that I use is called Skype, but there are other programs where you not only can talk to people, but you can see them. So I can communicate with my son in Ireland. Him and his wife are visiting Belfast this weekend. So if they want to send me pictures of things there, they can pop up on their iPad and say, hey, here, Dad, here's this, here's that, here's this. I have a friend in Romania who I spoke with this last week. That wouldn't have happened. So it gives us opportunity to speak to our children, our grandchildren. I mean, conceivably, when Tim was taking his Western trip, he could have been talking to us every night, telling us all the stuff he had happened, right? So we have some privileges that just didn't exist before. And that's a good thing, and can be. We know that certainly our face-to-face time, actually physically, like this, is dwindling. If you don't believe me, just ask my students, because they tell me all the time that, hey, Brooks, over here, I need your attention. That's something that's disappearing. And if you think that's disappearing, well, that means our face-to-face time with God is certainly on the endangered list. We live a super busy life in our world, and for us to find time of quiet to spend with our Creator is almost non-existent. Even for us people who are people of God, it's almost non-existent. Advent invites us into a new hope. It invites us into a hope where God announces to us that the Word will become flesh, and that God is not willing to allow any distance, any arm-length relationship, anything to separate us from God. God is not only willing, but God is insistent to be vulnerable, accessible, reachable, and attainable. God breaks down the barriers that keep us from being next to God. The Advent stories tell us that God sent us a message in a silent way. There was a star in the sky. Now, while it was not clearly understood by everybody, just read some about King Herod, he didn't get it at all. Nonetheless, it was an open invitation for everyone to receive the message. And that wasn't enough, so God even sent some other types of messengers, Gabriel and his company of angels, to sing and shout to the shepherds and others to listen to the hope that was coming. But yet that wasn't enough still. So God decided that He wanted to share the good news of His mercy, His love in person. And so He sent Christ. Now I know it could be intimidating to meet a world leader, someone of power and authority. And so to have a conversation with them might be a little bit tedious. So it might be really tedious for us human beings to have a conversation with the Creator of all. But who can't talk to a little baby? Cooing and cooing. We all can do that. And so God sent us a relationship with a child. And so hope is born in Jesus Christ. One of the great movies of our time, and one of my favorite movies, is The Shawshank Redemption. It's a tale of despair, of salvation, the other side of suffering. It tells the story of Andy Dufresne, who was a successful banker. He's condemned to Shawshank prison for wrongly being accused of murdering his wife and her lover. And I will tell you, it's a hard movie to watch. And it's not a movie for children. So if you're thinking, I'll go home and watch this movie that Brooks is talking about, make sure your children don't watch it with you, because it's not really a child's movie. It doesn't blink at showing the horrors of incarceration, the horrors of how human beings deal with one another and our human nature, the depravity that exists. But amidst all of this depravity of human intolerance and cruelty, Andy teaches his friend Red the meaning of hope, and a glimpse of what it could be to be human. One of his phrases that I recall is, Red, you need to either get busy living or get busy dying. You either have to hope that there is a future or think there is no future. Hope. And in that climactic scene, we see Andy Dufresne, who is out of prison, on his knees in a river, raining, and his arms are to heaven, where his hope has come from. Hope. Hope. The answer to Charlie Brown's question is clear. Rachel's hope for a healed marriage of her friends, Andy Dufresne's willingness and hope to live into a future, the faithfulness and trust of the prophet Micah resounds. The hope that people have, that I have talked with, who have children who may not have a holiday, who are wondering about their health and about how they're going to deal with death and those memories, about people who are wondering whether or not they should end their life. Hope. Hope. And God, to all those cries, says yes. Yes, I, God, will hear your cry. Yes, God, I will come and I will save you. Yes, God, I will restore your relationship fractured by your faithlessness and sin. Yes, I, God, will save you from your neighbors who wish to destroy you. Yes, I, God, will place my hand on you. Yes, I, God, will let you know the strength of the living God. This litany of need that we have as human beings is answered by this refrain of assurance that we hear from Micah. I look unto the Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation, and my God will hear me. This is the promise. This is the hope of Advent. God's strength meets us in whatever weakness it is we have. There is no place too dismal, no sin too egregious, no transgression too dire that can separate us from the love of God. Don't settle for anything less than the full power of God, Emmanuel, God with us. Don't allow yourself to be distracted by the glitter and the glimmer of the holiday, the candles lit, the sticky candy, the fine dress trees. Focus instead on forgiveness and restoration of hope via a loving God. One that will be faithful to you, has been faithful through generations, even back as far as 740 BC. We all need God. God is our hope. God is tangible. Came to this earth as a human being, not as a message, not as an email, not as a text, not even as a star, but as a human being, as a baby, to let us know that there is hope. Come to save us, we cry out to God, and God says, I am coming. I am coming. Defenseless as a baby, God reflects love and invites compassion. Now that, my friend, is a message of hope for all of us, regardless of our situation. And this is the Word of God for the people of God. Praise God.